This is the ISG Digital Dish.
Welcome to Digital Dish, a podcast for women's voices and perspectives in the digital world. We interview women in all industries because digital affects them all. As hosts, we want to share our passion and humor about the digital world we're part of, and we each bring a unique perspective and view from women in all parts of business. You're going to hear topics ranging from technical to organizational challenges, anything that speaks to how women are tackling issues to improve their environment.
I'm Jeanne Cuff. I have a deep curiosity on how women approach their careers in digital, and I love to hear their perspective on what they do and how they think about the careers. And of course, talking to smart women is fun.
I'm Lois Coatney, and I love hearing these interviews and bringing both a historical view and a future perspective to those interviews. It's so great to have such a variety of women who do so many things in their digital careers.
And I'm Julie Fernandez. I have a human resources perspective, and I really like to think about how these discussions affect people and organizations.
Together, we wanted to make sure smart women and their point of views were being heard.
Okay, everybody, welcome back to our latest episode of the ISG Digital Dish. I'm Jeannie, and got Lois and Julie on the podcast with me today.
Yeah, I'm excited. You keep telling us this is going to be a really great interview, but you need to give us a little bit of insight of what's coming.
You built the suspense, Jeannie. Now, come on.
Oh, all right. So just for those listening, I would not let them listen to it because I really want it to be a surprise, as it was for me when I interviewed. So I'm interviewing Maxine Nwaneri, who's just a really good speaker. She's an entrepreneur. Anyway, I do a full introduction of her. But what I did want to say is just how extraordinary her story is. And she really just tells us all about her life, which is extraordinary. And I didn't want to ruin the surprise. So that's all I can say about it. But I do want to say that she does talk about how she learned to find her voice and how to speak up for herself. And I think for me, that's really an important subject for right now as women are getting back to work. Things are hopefully getting back to normal. And how do you step up and ask for what you need in this environment? And I think it's particularly about women with small kids and all the craziness they've been through in this past year. So,
You know, I remember reading, and I can see it in myself, that women tend to feel like their actions are what they feel helps them move forward. So if you're at a job and you're looking for a promotion, you think, oh, if I do these 10 things, then I hope they'll notice me and, I can get promoted instead of, and I know it as a leader, very often it's the men in my organization who, are very vocal about how much they believe they should be paid or what they should be doing. And often I hear women say, oh, I'm really embarrassed to say this, but I really think I could be really good at this. And I'm like, why are you embarrassed to say that?
Right.
I think it's just built into us, and we need to get out of that shell. We do need to talk about what we want to do.
Yeah. And I'd like to think that there's a way to encourage that before you hit 50, right? Because there's kind of that, there's something natural. It's like what happens after the biological clock, where you're like, you hit 50 and you worry a little bit less about what people think about what you say. Yeah. And it's like, whoa, filters are just peeling away. So how do you balance like doing that professionally and productively younger in your career, right? And then making sure that all the filters don't fall off when you've had a number of years under your belt.
I'm sorry, Julie. I feel like this is a little pointed towards me, maybe. No, I have no filters. Very few filters. So.
But I think it's a good thing. Yeah, but you're right. If only maybe there's going to be some words of wisdom or things to help women who are younger, right?
Yeah.
When we were all more timid.
Where's that in between,
It's true. And that's why I think this interview is going to be great, because Maxine is a mom. She's got young kids. She's an entrepreneur, and she founded a group called The Future is Greater. So it just, I think how she got there, and I think it's a great lesson for all of our young listeners and for anybody of any age. So great story.
All right.
Yeah. Now I got to think about my filters.
Okay.
Anyway.
All right. Well, enjoy the interview.
All right. Thanks, Jeannie.
Hi, everybody from the Digital Dish. I have an interview today with Maxine Nwaneri. She's from London. I'm going international. She's an entrepreneur and founder of The Future is Greater. Welcome, Maxine. Tell me about yourself and how you got started. And because I think I don't even want to tell anybody that. I just want to have you get started and sort of talk about what you do.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a speaker, and I'm actually also an executive coach, and I coach women around speaking. And that's what we're talking about. And typically, it's kind of worth sharing this before I share how I got started. When I coach professional women about speaking up, getting their voices heard, the main things that come up are they don't feel that they're good enough. They worry, what is anybody going to think about me? They don't feel like they're ready. And while all of that might be true, I know I personally felt all the above and then some before I got started. My message really is like all of those fears and worries are so irrelevant, because as women, we are often so much more powerful than we give ourselves credit for. We're so powerful to do things that we never could dream that we're capable of, whether that's as a speaker or otherwise. And most importantly, before I get into my story, the key thing for me is that other people's success, other people's breakthroughs are often tied to us saying yes and speaking up. And that was one of the most important things my own story taught me, which is, like I said, a very unlikely route into speaking. I was born in Nigeria in a family of 4. I was such a shy introvert who happily spent most of her childhood reading one book or the other. The thought of actually speaking in front of anyone was absolutely mortifying. And then my family moved from Nigeria to the UK. And to be honest, we had quite a difficult time adjusting to the new culture initially. And I handled it terribly as an introvert who didn't know how to kind of communicate her feelings. I just bottled things up and frustrations, years of doing this. And one day I just snapped and lost it, ran away from home. It was just literally one stupid decision after another, starting with the wrong guy, drugs, dropping out of school. And that basically led to me crashing to rock bottom, to the point where I found myself, Jeannie, homeless, down to my last few pounds. Now, I know you guys in the US call pounds weight. We call pounds here money. So I was down to my last few dollars equivalent. And I was just so desperate in this kind of rock bottom mess I'd got myself into, that actually somebody's suggestion that we go meet this weird guy who's looking to basically exploit women, somebody suggested, let's go meet this guy to get a job. We can make loads of money. I thought it was a good idea. That's how bad things were. But the realization of what I was getting myself into didn't really hit me until we walked into the room for this interview. And the awful smell of the place just hit me, and I began to panic, thinking, oh my God, what in the world am I doing here? I mean, I actually wanted to be a doctor growing up. My parents took me to church growing up, like what am I doing? So I began to freak out. I think I was probably shaking visibly at this point. And I must have zoned out, because the next thing I remember was this guy basically snapping me out of my trance, saying, you do know how much you're supposed to charge, right? And at this point, my heart was going to explode out my chest. I had no clue. I worked at Starbucks last. What do women charge for such a thing? I mean, I was just so disgusted. I'd never felt so ashamed, so afraid, so alone. And I remember I just stood there, just mouth open, no sound coming out, not really sure what to do, where to look, just thinking, oh my God, I can't do this, I can't do this, I can't do this. And it was like he was in my mind, because the next thing he said, sort of in response to my thought, was, what choice do people like you have anyway? And that was like a slap in the face, because he was right. I'd let down every single person who loved me. I'd lost everything. I was such a mess. And I remember I just stood there thinking, oh my goodness, how can this be my life? How in the world did I get into this? How do I get out of this? More importantly. And as I asked that last question in my mind, I heard this voice within me say, this is not who you're meant to be. You're meant for so much more. And I had no idea who or what that voice was, but I wanted so badly for that voice to be right. I chose to believe it. And that gave me the strength I needed to basically turn and run out of that room into the freezing cold street. Now, I know Chicago, where you are, is cold, but cold air had never felt so good. Cold air was oh my goodness.
I'm blown away.
I had no money, I had no plans, but I just had this knowing that I was meant for more. So I kept on tuning into that voice, and it literally helped helped me turn my life around. I got back into the school system, became an award-winning student, graduated of one of the best universities in the world. That helped me catapult my career to becoming one of the top in my industry, in my corporate career, before I felt led to go start my executive coaching and consulting business. And now we'll get into the speaking bit. But I've seen like the impossible become possible in my life, as you can imagine. Like I had no prospects.
Okay, hold on. That's amazing. I did not know this, but I love this story. So thank you.
Okay.
You did surprise me. That is an amazing story. Keep going. I'm sorry, Maxine. I just had to say that. Go ahead.
So yeah, no, all of this is relevant because you're like, what has this got to do with speaking? Just people might be wondering, but it's relevant. So I've seen this kind of crazy lifestyle turn around. I've seen the impossible become possible just by us tapping into the unlimited power that's available to help us achieve anything. So about 5 years ago, I kind of was an executive coach. I got invited to Rome to a big women's conference to be an executive coach. Now, as we were kind of going through, they accidentally booked me to coach and speak at one of their forums. And I contacted them saying, well, I'm not a speaker. Like, why have you booked me as a speaker? And they're like, oh, yeah, we know, but we needed someone. And it looks like you could be good. And I thought, oh, my goodness, I began to panic thinking, I'm not a speaker. Like, you know, who would want to listen? Like, what would I say? I'm not good enough. All the things, right?
Right.
And then I remembered, I was like, if anything my life has taught me is that we're powerful enough to do anything. So I said, yeah, I accepted. So I kept checking in for that guidance on, you know, what do I even talk about? And then, the scariest thing I got was, you need to tell them that story. So I gave you like the 2-3 minute version of it just now.
Yeah.
So you need to give them like I think it was like an 8-minute slot. You need to give them like the 8-minute version. And I began to freak out because at this point, I'm this like Cambridge graduate turned high flying corporate lady turned Cambridge, you know, executive coach. People saw me that way. And I wanted them to see me that way. The last thing I wanted to do was tell them that story. But I remember I kept on it. Literally, we got to the point of like, okay, we're in a forum, in a circle. And I'm sitting there having this internal debate thinking, I can't do this. Should I just run out the door? Like, what do I do? But I kept on hearing, you need to share that story.
Right.
So I remember like getting up. I'd never really spoken, shy introvert, literally shaking like a leaf and petrified, voice shaking, no practice whatsoever. I told that story. I didn't make eye contact with anybody in this circle. And I finished.
Wow.
And I think when I finished, I was thinking, okay, they're going to like throw stones or their shoes or something at me. But when I looked up, there was like silence for like 30 seconds. I looked up at everybody and there was hardly a dry eye in the room.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember so many people came up to me afterwards and said, oh my God, like I needed to hear that story. Like I was feeling like I can't do it. You inspired me. So many people saying, oh, my son is on drugs right now. And this gives me hope that there's, you know, something for him.
Right.
And I just realized something. This is not about me. This is literally not about me. And I continued to speak, you know, till where I am today. And, you know, my journey taught me 3 things. We can kind of jump into it after this. But the 3 main things is like, number 1, us as women speaking up, it's less about us and more about the people that need to hear our voices and our stories. And you don't need to have a crazy story like mine. Like, quite frankly, you don't. But in my work coaching women, like, they share things like with their peers that are like, you know, oh my God, it was so glad that you could share that with me because I'm not alone then. Or even somebody just half a step behind you. You think, well, everybody knows this. No, they don't. So you sharing and being of service is such a powerful thing. Number 1, it's not about you. Number 2, trust that still small voice within. Now, I know everybody believes different things. I personally came to know that voice as the voice of God. But we all have that voice within that tells you you're meant for more, that tells you, hey, reach for that. Trust that voice. Don't listen to the voice that tells you you're not ready, you'll never be enough. You know, no, listen to that little tiny voice that says that you can do it and get your guidance from that space. Because if you're waiting to be ready, you're never going to be ready.
Right.
And number 3, don't be afraid to fail. Like literally, if you look at, you know, who's a fantastic public speaker right now, and you compared that first speech in Rome, I mean, Rome of all places, like it was a disaster of a speech. It was a failure, but that was so irrelevant because it touched the hearts of people. It changed the lives of people. So don't be afraid of what you might call failure. Practice, 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 practice. And that's how you get better. So there's lots more I could share, but I wanted to kind of hit you with that bomb to get started with.
Wow. No, I'm sitting here going, woo. Okay. No, but it's true. I think it's like such an important thing to have women's voices speak. And I was asked to do a speech for something else, and they were like, oh, you should speak. I'm like, what am I going to, you know, I'm an old lady. They're not going to talk. Anyway, I loved it. And everybody, all these lovely 30-year-old women are coming up saying, that is so exciting. I told them about how I got involved in technology. It was like I was a rock star. And I'm not as dramatic story as your story, of course.
It doesn't have to be.
But it doesn't have to be, right?
Because we think that we need it. We think we need that big story. I mean, I tell stories of like when I first had a kid and like some of the less, dramatic stories. And those ones are equally impactful. It's all about, what is it? What is the point you're trying to make? How are you trying to move that person forward?
Right.
And they don't always need a big homeless, rags to riches story.
Right. Right. But that's an amazing story. So thank you so much for sharing that with us.
My pleasure.
Definitely. The audience is going to love it. I do want to talk to you a little bit about, so you went from executive coach to speaking, so we kind of got that background. But I do want to talk a little bit about, you had a story. You have great stories, by the way. So this is really storytelling time.
Thank you.
I met Maxine, just for everybody to know, I met Maxine. She was doing the Digital Revolutions Award. She was actually the MC, and it was a tight time frame. It was like, 3 hours?
Yeah.
There's a lot going on. You had a lot of interaction, but you said that day, you told me that day was just a complete crazy day.
Oh.
So tell us the story. Tell us the story about that day.
This is the one because I'm totally recovered perfectionist. I think now I like things to be perfect, and I knew I was hosting these awards. I've spoken at conferences now. I've been doing this for years, and I'm like, okay, so what I need is before I go film these awards, dealing with all these amazing people like you and all these companies, I need a good 8 hours rest. I need to have time, to do hair and makeup, and I need to, read my script. And I had this perfect thing planned out. So the night before, when I'm supposed to be having like 8 hours rest, I have a young son. Like I have a 5-year-old daughter and a nearly 2-year-old son. And kids, they look at your plans, they laugh. So the night before, my son is like up the whole night, literally throwing up, like from I think like 1 a.m. till I think like nearly 5:30 in the morning when I was supposed to get up. Like this child is throwing up, and I'm more concerned as a mom, thinking what in the world's going on, and not sleeping.
Right.
And I'm just like, oh my goodness, I'm supposed to be resting. I'm supposed to be having 8 hours sleep. So anyway, thankfully, my husband's like, listen, you need to go host these awards, right? I'll take over. So I'm like, I get up at like 5:30. I get up. I didn't sleep at 5:30. I kind of left the room and I was like, oh my God, what do I do? Like literally, I need a miracle.
Right.
And then I literally just, again, went within. I'm like, what is that voice within me telling me? And it was, you've got this. You've got this. No matter how you feel, you've got this. Get strength in knowing that you've got this.
Right.
So I was like, okay, I can do that. So I did my best to kind of get ready. I was in the taxi to go to this the studio to film. And I was supposed to be reading my script. Well, I wasn't reading my script. I was asleep and drooling over my makeup in the taxi. The taxi driver has to kind of wake me up like, hey, you're here. And I'm like, oh my gosh, where am I? Like, who are you? And he's like, no, you're here. I'm like, oh yes, oh my gosh, I'm filming the award ceremony, like high profile thing. Anyway. So I come out this thing like disoriented, and I basically go in there and I literally just said, okay, dear God, I need a miracle. Went into the bathroom, calmed myself down, and came back in. And to be honest, I'd never had more fun on a job ever, I think. It was just so amazing and just kind of gleaning that strength from outside of myself, So I say all of that to say that, sometimes we think like, oh my gosh, it didn't go perfectly. I didn't get the 8 hours sleep. I didn't read my script. And, I know the old me would have been like, oh, this isn't happening. I'd have probably canceled or be like, oh, get someone else to do it. Or like, just been so nervous. But just knowing that you can kind of tap into like this something bigger than you is huge, Yeah,
it's the inner strength. It's the inner strength. You're like, okay, push through. Just you can do it. It's X amount of time. But I tell you, when I was watching, I was obviously zooming this whole thing.
Oh, really?
Nobody would have known. Nobody would have known. Nobody would have known you got no sleep, that you were up all night and you were just like half dead to the world. Nobody would have guessed because you handled it so well, which is why when you reached out through LinkedIn, I was like, yes, so I do want to mention one other thing. One of the things I was really impressed with too, after the session, and I put some notes on LinkedIn saying it was a great job. You reached out to almost everybody who was on the session or made comments. You messaged us all. And I'm telling you, that's something I rarely get. Like I always like to put a nice comment in because I know how hard it is to get yourself into that mood and to do all this and to prepare something like that. But when you messaged me, I'm like, this is somebody I want to talk to more. Obviously, you had something going on.
Oh, thank you.
So I have to say, I really appreciate that. And I think it was also part of who you are, but also your story. You reached out. You said, hey, thank you for commenting. Thank you for doing, I think that was really, I think we as women need to do that more. So I appreciated that.
Yes, because oftentimes I'd think it. I'd often think, oh, that was a lovely person. Oh, I'd really love to connect. And I've now made it a practice to say, you know what, they can't get into my head and read that because, sometimes we have all these insecurities. Well, let me speak for myself. I have all these insecurities like, oh, I'm not going to do a good enough job, or it's not perfect, so I didn't sleep. And when someone actually does a good job, it's so nice to hear good job, Yeah. And so sometimes when we think it, we think, oh, well, they know already. Maybe they don't. Maybe their kid was up the whole night throwing up and they're thinking, oh, it was a mess. So I kind of make a point of when I think something like, oh, she's an amazing woman, I make a point of saying it because people don't hear that enough.
Right.
Sometimes if we need to give constructive feedback, which we do, we do, but it's not so natural to say, oh, that was great.
Yeah.
So I think the more we can say that was great, those sort of comments, when we do need to kind of say something that's more of a constructive feedback sort of thing, there's been so much positivity that then, you don't have to be like, oh, okay, I've just got this negativity at me. You've kind of got more positives, a positives bank.
Yeah. I like that idea. Positive. You're building it up.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you one last question. I'm going to let you go because I know it's getting later in the day for you. But I wanted to ask you, as an executive coach, what are some of the things that you're seeing, either positive or negative, for a lot of women or people throughout this whole year of COVID, year plus? Do you have any feedbacks on that? Do you have any thoughts on what you're seeing and hearing?
Yeah, my goodness, I could write a book about this one, but let me try and net it down.
Maybe you should write a book.
Maybe I should, right? Yeah, it's been such a challenging time, And in terms of the people I'm coaching most, it's mothers at the moment who are professional mothers who are trying to juggle it all. Some mothers were out there working. A lot of them were home where okay, so I'm at home with these kids. Some of them had to be homeschooled. And then I'm also trying to keep up appearance with workplace and I've got to deliver the same level of work. And there's no kind of line between, work and life. And it's just been one long blur of people trying to be resilient and, trying to, be good at both and then feeling like they're failing at both,
right?
Work and life. And, that's kind of been the main thing. This has been the case for everybody who's had that, but especially the moms with, young kids, especially. Right. The moms that we coach with older kids, it's less of an issue, but the moms with young kids, it's just one big blur of I'm not good enough anywhere. And it's, as a mom myself of 2 young kids, I feel that, but thankfully I have my own coach to go process this with. And if I could leave people with any message is that you're typically always doing better than you think you are. I would say with the speaking and with the, anything get some help, whether it's in the coach or as a mentor, in somebody who can help you see beyond your blind spots, because we all have them.
Right.
So if there's not somebody that you can kind of speak to get that level of support, to know that you're not alone, I'd get that for myself. I don't know if you guys have communities or whatever. Yeah. Ensure that you have some sort of support system so that you don't feel like, oh my goodness, I'm just drowning.
Yeah.
This not good enoughness. And also, things are starting to open up now. And, that's a great thing, of course, we can do more. But for some people, that's bringing a level of anxiety because it's okay, so what does this mean? We've had this prolonged period of where we kind of found our rhythm after the initial shock. What does this mean? So I can't really stress enough the need for some sort of support to, speak up if you need help. So a lot of the women I'm hearing, they're under a lot of pressure, but they don't want to speak to, superiors because they think, oh, well, they think I'm slacking. You need help. If you need help, you need help. So yeah, get the help that you need to ensure that you're communicating. We're talking about speaking up. It's relevant. It may be to speak up in the home if you need support. The biggest thing I see women that struggle with the most is if you're living with a partner who is, not carrying their weight. A lot of the women do most of the unpaid work. So you're trying to keep up with the kids. You're trying to keep up with the work. You're trying to keep up with unpaid stuff. Usually the first place you need to speak up is in the home,
right? So
that you can build as much as you can true partnership. And that's not an easy thing to do because if you've been married for let's say 10 years and you've done everything because you've always done everything and then you're suddenly wanting to be empowered, it's not that straightforward. So I highly recommend getting some level of support to do that and just know that you're not alone. You never have to be alone through any of this.
Well, Maxine, I really want to say thank you. I just am blown away by your story. And I'm thrilled that I was able to have you join us on the Digital Dish. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been so much fun.
Hi, Lois. Welcome back. I know we just both listened to Maxine's interview.
Yes, that was an amazing interview. I'm still just it's so many things going through my head just listening to her, and her not only her story was fantastic, but just you can get the sense from her if she just wants to share and, help others and, just give other women a voice and show what it means. It was an amazing story.
Yeah, you can feel when people are passionate about something, right?
Yeah.
And they have something from the heart to share. The first thing that I heard, like that just kind of stood out to me in that conversation, was her reinforcement of the fact that she's an introvert by nature. And of course, you wouldn't guess it from the interview, right? When she had plenty to say. It immediately caught my attention because I relate to being an introvert, which I think shocks people sometimes, but I feel I'm very introverted. And yet I've gone through a personal journey, right, to be less introverted, especially as a professional, only without like the snapping and the whole big bender thing was part of her story. So I thought, okay, well, there are ways to kind of progress from feeling introverted or unsure of yourself to having that power that she talked about tapping into. And, boy, do I wish I'd have gotten there quicker, right?
Yeah, well, I'm the same way. I mean, I'm definitely, whether you take the test to find out you're an introvert or you just recognize it, I guess, over time, to what you're most comfortable with. I'm certainly that person too. And I think she talked about self-confidence. And sometimes I think, I feel like especially in the business world, we live in an extroverted world. Many leaders are extroverts, and we kind of feel like you have to be an extrovert to be successful. But I think maybe part of this too is we find a balance, maybe as a person who figuring out where they're most comfortable, but also what they're really good at. And it's okay, to be good at certain things that might be different than those extroverts around you. The values or the strengths of an introvert and why it's so important in business is they're often better listeners. They observe what's happening because they're actually sitting back because they're comfortable in observing. They probably think a little bit further and have potentially more problem solving skills that are more thought through, just a couple of things. But, I guess the point is, you build the confidence by really understanding who you are, what your strengths are, what might be different than others around you. And that's actually a strength in itself that you're adding, to that team.
Yeah, that's really insightful.
I wanted to say that I think it's important that we have a space for the introverts to speak up, both at work and within yourself. Like, I think that's also part of this, as Lois was saying. So that's just what I wanted to add. I think businesses need to listen and make sure they give introverts the space, or you have to make it yourself.
Well, I love the fact, Lois, that you called out some particular skills and, the things that introverts are often best suited, right, to contribute to the dynamics, because everybody can't be an extrovert or nobody's listening to anyone. But I also feel like there's some female characteristics, right? Some things about women that you toss in there, and, whether they're true or just kind of generalizations, but making things personal. It's something that touches people in a unique way because you're related to it. And then you're selling whatever that experience is to others because it is personal to you. And I feel like, introverts are probably real good at that, but women, it feels like a characteristically female type of a trait. And also she mentioned at one point in time being a recovering perfectionist. And that also, just slapped me in the face because I thought, well, yeah, you want it done like absolutely right. And down to the letter. And we have to learn, maybe sometimes how to let go. And I feel like maybe that's also, somewhat characteristic of women, of introverts, of folks like me. I related to it for sure.
Well, I think the other thing from, the experience, and she said what was that pivotal point, early on in her story where she, I guess got to her senses and ran out, is she recognized her own value. I think there was a statement made to her. I couldn't repeat it, but it was something about her value. And I think one of the challenges many women have, and whether it's because we're perfectionists and we always think about the flaws, or, when we compare ourselves to our peers, we sometimes don't recognize our value. I think others recognize our value, but it's almost we're our worst critic. And we need to really not just convince ourselves, but we need to recognize it. And maybe it's writing it down, it's practicing talking about it to our friends and colleagues, because being really clear and confident in our value is so important, whether you're asking for a raise or you want to get that next job, or you want to just simply, have the confidence to lead something. That value is something that is important for all of us to recognize and be very comfortable, recognizing it and articulating it and living it.
Yeah, I think that goes right to also, thinking about our role as mentor and coach to each other, right? And to others. When we're choosing to mentor someone or trying to help someone along, just remembering that being that, still small voice, right? That somebody might be listening for, and thinking about offering that up, even if it feels corny or feels goofy or unnecessary, we need that encouragement, and it's something that I think we're just really well suited to share with each other and to contribute.
Well, those stories, like she said, like she was potentially uncomfortable to share her story early on, but think of the impact it's had even on us, right? We've been around the block a few times, and I'm sure it impacted us. I think we all recognize we have stories, even though they might be less, dramatic or difficult as hers. It is important to share our stories, and it does mean a lot, and we need to do more of it.
Yeah. I had one other area, Lois, that, I felt was a big theme of Maxine's interview. And that was, one of her 3 lessons or 3 big points was don't be afraid to fail. And it just instantly made me think about, failing forward. And I'm sure I've heard that in many different contexts, right? That it's okay to fail. Agile. It's an agile, it's an agile thing.
Fail often.
Fail often, fail first, fail whatever. But you're supposed to fail fast. Like fail forward at least, And so I started just kind of poking around at failing forward and thinking, how can I do that? And I found a woman, Lynn Schroeder, who'd written, action steps to take when we fail. And it sounded like an AA meeting, right? Like acknowledge the failure, own it, feel bad about it. And I had a hard time actually, digesting these steps that felt like, I was being prescribed therapy, but it's probably really, I don't know if it's grieving, if it's therapy, like there's something about learning how to fail successfully that we need to be okay with.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And, I think we probably all had failures at one point in time and probably, lamented over them. But you know what? It is true. And they say you learn more from your failures and successes. I know it sounds like, nice for you to tell me that, but it's so important. And I guess she had, great wisdom around. And it's how you react. I guess that's probably the thing. It's not so much dwelling on what it was specifically that you failed at, but how do you absorb that and how do you react to it? Because that's really, what is our true strength. Jeannie's like, you're jumping in.
No, so I just think there's a balance though between, she talks about listening to your inner voice and listening to that voice inside of you. But I'm saying, but don't listen to the one that tells you failed.
Yes.
Just listen to the one that says you're great, you have value. Don't listen to the one that says you failed, because the failure one is the one that holds you back.
True.
You need to say, I failed, I learned from it, moving forward.
That's the fail forward.
Yeah, there you go. Fail forward.
That's the fail forward. There you go. I found it.
So, me, and then I found another couple of, to me, I know we can't visually share a bumper sticker or something, but there were a couple of pithy little things I found around that same area that stuck in my head. And one was, failure is a bruise and not a tattoo. But that was cool.
I love that. That's great.
That's awesome.
That is really awesome.
Yeah, that was one. And then I have one more, if you're ready for it.
Oh my gosh.
It was, be okay with the F word. F being fail.
I thought we were going a different way with that, Julie, but that's good.
But there we go.
So did I. There you go.
Well, that's a good way to end this. But Jeannie, thank you so much for bringing Maxine's story to us. That was just really a delight to hear, and just, kind of a self booster. I think that's great. I hope many women have the opportunity to hear that and learn from it. So thank you very much.
thanks for joining us on ISG Digital Dish. If you like our podcast, subscribe and please rate and review us. Thanks.